Is there anything about the UEL that you dislike?
But they're tearing it down.
The building was originally a carriage house, and there are these projects at Brown called GISP, where students will work with faculty to undertake some kind of research or grand project. And what they decided to do was convert this old carriage house into a center for environmental studies. This happened in the mid to late 70s, when, you could get away with doing things like that. So, I mean, there were students up on the roof. They created little maquettes, and they went in and did a lot of work. I mean, they put the greenhouse on there, and they were salvaging things from other buildings so that it would be very environmentally friendly. And it was really quite inventive, the things they were coming up with. I mean, we still have the old solar panels up on the roof, and we still use them. They still work.
There was a significant fundraising effort by the founder of the Environmental Studies program, Harold Ward, and students and professionals in the area were involved in the design and construction to do an adaptive reuse project to make it this physical center for environmental studies.
I actually knew Harold when he was just a chemistry professor before he took his law degree and got more involved in addressing the problems of pollution in the early days in the 80s. Harold began to realize that Brown should have a course and a place and a center where students could study this. And indeed, that was a vision of the UEL.
Some students used to live here, and they helped rebuild it and sort of wanted to make it this living, sustainable, experiment, I guess.
They would live on the upstairs, and then downstairs was where classes and administrative things would happen. So my office here used to be someone's bedroom. I mean, I even had an alumni came by at one point and said, I used to sleep in your office.
As far as I understand, this is one of the first buildings at Brown that was not only a kind of a student cooperative, but also a classroom at the same time. And I think today we see a lot of that at the UEL. A lot of that is carried over culturally.
So it's maintained a lot of that character and history, I think, into its iteration now as a classroom and workspace. So all the wood paneling, the carpeting, a lot of that is pretty true to the original form of it as kind of a home. The offices upstairs are all really comfortable and livable, and that's, I would say, why I come here for just as many academic as non-academic reasons. There's a lot of social gatherings that happen here. Collaboration with students and with teachers is very comfortable, and it's a living space, I think, and that's always been the case since it was first built. I have an audition tonight.
For what?
For West Side Story in September, or a callback, actually.
Who do you want to be?
Well, I thought I was just auditioning to be Riff. The guy's like, when you're Raja, because that's more my speed. But then, we all know.
Nope.
UEL has a lot of purposes. It's first and foremost the home of the Environmental Studies department. So it has a classroom downstairs where a lot of ES classes are held, and the professors have offices upstairs where students can meet with them.
It serves as an aggregating point for students where they could come together. It serves as a community garden for people in the community who aren't affiliated with Brown. It serves as a greenhouse for organizations like the African Alliance of Rhode Island, who depend on that greenhouse to start their seedlings for their farming. It serves as a meeting place for activists. It serves as a meeting place for young entrepreneurs. Brown Market Shares started here. Farm Fresh Rhode Island started right here in the UEL, which is one of the most successful food hubs in the entire United States right now. It serves as a purpose is to cook food, right? For different student groups, for Indigenous Studies to cook native foods, which they did last fall. For students to heat up meals, for students to make meals together.
It is this physical center for environmental action on the campus. Many of the students that come in and out of the building and use it aren't environmental studies concentrators, but might be involved in the campus environmental stewardship program or might be involved in some local or even international issues. But this is the place that they come together and have a physical space to meet and get organized around that and discuss some of those initiatives.
So the UEL is a center for all of the different environmental groups on campus. So I'm a member of the Rhode Island Student Climate Coalition, which meets here, and a lot of other student groups meet here, but also some Providence community groups. So the Citizens Climate Lobby meets here. It's a center for bikes at Brown. They have their workshop in the basement where you can come to borrow a bike or get your own bike fixed. It's sort of a space for primarily for undergrads, but also for all members of the Brown and Providence communities at large.
For Bikes at Brown, it serves a huge purpose. We used to be in the basement of Fonts. We shared a really tiny space with the outing club, but here we have a garage which goes right out onto the green, so it's super easy for people to ride their bike in, bring it in. It's super accessible. We also have a space in the basement where we can store all of our bikes. We have a lot of different old bikes lying around that we're working on, and we can kind of stash them there, so it's great to have a huge amount of space. And then it's also just great to be around other environmental groups that, when people ask where's Bikes at Brown, it makes sense that it's in the UEL.
So it's not just a place that has classes, but will also support events, and there's just students that they're not necessarily even concentrators, they just like this space. They like to hang out here, use the kitchen, cook something up for themselves, or hang out in the garden. I mean, when the weather gets nice, that garden, people love having meetings out there.
I think the best way to describe the UEL is that it's a very open, day-lit building. So in terms of the overall performance of the building, we use the sun to heat and light the space, and the orientation of the windows have a lot to do with that.
You could look around and there's, natural light coming into the offices everywhere. We don't have overhead lights half the time. It's a structure that was built with the greenhouse that provides a certain amount of heating. And this is a fairly older building. It's a lot of this stuff was done in the 1970s, but to date, it's still a very efficient building because of the simplicity, not because of the high-tech nature of it. It doesn't need LEED Silver, LEED Gold certification because it's already beating most of those buildings, and it has beat most of those building efficiency for a very long time.
It's really pretty, and there's always sunlight, which is really cool, instead of if you want to get away from the really artificial fluorescent light bulbs everywhere.
This wonderful graduate of, she was a 99 grad student here, name is Emily Stander, class of 1999, wrote this wonderful letter about the value of that, and I'd be glad to read a passage or two. It says, the UEL is a highly energy efficient building with a greenhouse, skylights to promote day lighting, heavy duty wall insulation, low flow toilets, and a lush and productive community garden.
My sister had gardened here about 4 years ago and allowed me to garden as well. So it was a great way to practice urban agriculture and sustainability, but it was also a great way to teach my children about those processes, and it was a great way to meet people from all over the world. I've met people from Cambodia, from India, from England, all over the world.
I think just being here, I always engage in different conversations related to the environment, related to just personal life, and as professors walk by, they engage in conversations, and it just feels very welcoming, and there's not such a distinct barrier between student life and professors.
The faculty-student interactions are great in the UL. You can't help but run into each other, and you can't help but just start talking, not just about academics, but summer plans and your families and where you grew up, and some of those conversations that are really meaningful and that really build relationships that goes much beyond just talking about feedback on papers or environmental theory.
Being able to use the kitchen in that way too, like washing my plate next to a professor after a talk is like an experience I would never think that I would have. So that's really great. And just being, I don't know, there's so much space for undergraduates to use in a very like unofficial, relaxed, sort of spontaneous way.
There are plenty of other buildings on campus that are really good for specific academic purposes, or that that have good lab facilities or good arts spaces or that sort of thing. But the UEL is, I think more so than any other building on campus, a place that students can come to feel like they have a place of their own. And so it really speaks to Brown's focus on undergrads, and historically the environmental science and studies programs focus on undergrads and undergrad leadership.
I think that there's just something that's, I don't know, it's a difficult quality to name, but just in the way that the space is set up, that really brings a lot of different communities together, where they become one bigger UEL community. Like, I don't study environmental studies, but I'm still part of this big, magical, environmentally minded group of people that hangs out in this room and the next room over in the kitchen. And yeah, we do a lot of awesome stuff here. And I don't know that that's really replicable outside this space, or at least it's really hard to do.
Like as an engineer, our space is usually, we have a building which is Bears and Holly. And I've worked in the computer lab before. There's no windows, it's a little sad. It's really quiet as well, usually. The UEL, it's just so much more homey, so much more welcoming, cozy, and just a little more vibrant too.
It's cathartic. It's my go-to place for healing and tranquility and peace and interaction with other members of the community, the Brown community, the East Side community.
I'd say it's just really a home in its both physical presence and then the response that has on the activities that take place here. It allows for a sort of relationship with the building and for the people in it to have a more comfortable, like really meaningful, safe space, honestly, for thought and for collaboration.
It really makes me feel happy about my job, because when I come to the UEL, it just reminds me why I'm in this job and why I'm working towards creating a more sustainable future, because it's filled with students, it's filled with faculty who are engaged in the same types of programs. The fact that it's a sustainable building itself, with solar panels, with passive or with super insulation. So it's just like a constant visual reminder to me that this building and the people in it are making a difference.
I also think that because the work we do is very, very intense sometimes, and it's really hard to process these subjects that we deal with on a daily basis, like existential threats of climate change and environmental justice issues locally, nationally, all these huge topics, that sometimes I really need this space to come to specifically and have people that really understand like the challenges that I'm going through.
Like the UEL is unique in that there's so many different, like related but still separate projects that like meet in the same space. Whether that's like academic classes, the environmental science curriculum, or like empower groups, or like facilities internships, and that they're all tangentially related enough that people like kind of know each other and can talk about similar things. But I think it's pretty special to have all of those things meeting in the same place. I know a lot of other departments just like are kind of working across the campus, and like the job and like extracurricular activities related to that are in different places. So I think it's really special that all kind of tangentially environmentally related issues kind of happen at the UEL.
So the future of the UAL is really in question. The university wants to tear it down to make room for a performing arts center. And while performing arts center is definitely necessary on the campus, we like just need bigger auditoriums, I think. it's really sad and sort of heartbreaking that a building that I love so much and that has like meant so much historically to Brown and to the ES department too is just going to be torn down.
I would like to see Brown have a really high quality performing arts center here. The challenge is that this location, there's some great historic buildings that still suggest the historic fabric of the street here. There's one particular academic program I'm affiliated with that would have to move out of the way. But technically, there's a bus tunnel right there, that would be in the center of this building.
Caution, bus is turning.
So I think that it's a pretty non-transparent process of working with an architect and different zoning rules, but the future is not looking too great at the moment. Although students are mobilizing, and we're not going to let it happen that easily.
This building's kind of been on the chopping block for the university for about a decade and a half, I think. And every single time they talk about knocking this place down, you see everybody who's connected to this building in any way just come out of the woodwork to defend this place and to talk about what this community means, kind of like what this documentary is doing right now.
I've been a part of working to try to really just like explain to the university why this building is so important and why this community is so important.
A bunch of students gathered and we started a campaign to collect people's experiences through surveys, and we created a petition also.
I think a lot of people that aren't involved specifically with this building just don't see the value in it. They don't understand how many lives it's impacted.
It's not just a building that's being torn down, it's a whole concept.
Certainly nothing can replicate the UEL, and I think that's the saddest part of the UEL most likely not being here in 2 years.
I don't think you can just throw all of the things that are housed here into different existing academic buildings and expect the same kind of UEL magic to show up again. Something positive that could come out of this is if they found another like underutilized building right now and said to students like, hey, make this your own, like you did back in the 70s. I think you could see a lot of awesome, passionate work going into making a new space home.
I really, really hope that people in power will reconsider taking this building away, because I think it's very special, and it's not just a building. For a lot of people, it's become a home, and I'm not sure that any other space on campus can really provide that. The thing that makes my job worth it to me are the students. I really love the students. I love working with the students. They contribute so much, and I want to make sure that they have a place where they feel safe and that they can really share their thoughts and work together and collaborate and help change the future.